Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining this talk. I'm here to present Andrija, who is going to talk about some security improvements in CloudStack, in particular with authentication and login. And hereby I pass to Andrija.
Thanks, Bobby. Hopefully you can guys hear me well. All right, so today I'm going to share a couple of words about 2FA with an additional layer of authentication, basically, or additional layer of security, if you like, irrelevant of your authentication provider. And I'm also going to introduce you and show a quick demo about using OAuth2 as the new authentication provider in CloudStack 4.19. A few words about me, myself, and I. I'm working as a cloud architect in ShapeBlue for last, I would say, 5, almost 6 years now. There is English phrase with my teeth into, which you can see I can somehow manage to do. Involved I've been in IT and various variants of it for almost 15 years and more. And I've been involved with CloudStack for now probably around 10 years since 4.0.0 incubating. Anyway, a project committer, PMC member, petrol head. I express my freedom to say that I dislike, not hate, just dislike Tesla, because every real engine needs to be audible. That's my personal take on it, and I'm all fine with different opinions. In the meantime, trying to be a drummer or actually learn to play drums, and so on. Moving forward. I'm going to give a quick recap on the different authentication mechanisms in CloudStack. Not going to spend too much time on these, and then we are going to move to the OAuth2 as the new authentication provider or a new way to authenticate. And also, what I want to say is that basically we have all of these plus 2FA. So whenever you again authenticate against something, whether it's a local password database in CloudStack or LDAP, SAML, whatever, if you configure 2FA, you will be then asked for an additional 2FA PIN, usually generated by the TOTP applications and so on. But anyway, let's move on and go into more details. Right. So first, I guess, thing that came with CloudStack was a local authentication. Passwords are stored encrypted in the database. If you need, for whatever reason, in very specific cases, like upgrades or moving from maybe a different version of CloudStack, specifically from Cloud Platform to CloudStack, because of various different encryption mechanisms, you might want to replace passwords of certain users because they won't be able to log in with their own password. So you can do what I would like to say a hack replace, or basically do a hack by generating a new user with a known password, copy the value which is encrypted, and paste it into the password field of your existing users so that they can log in actually after this upgrade, which is actually a migration sometimes from Cloud Platform to CloudStack. And as it says on the tin, it becomes by default, or is actually a default authentication mechanism. Moving to LDAP. LDAP is, I guess, I'm assuming, actually the next thing which was introduced in CloudStack. We can have either a global LDAP configuration, which all domains will be using, or actually users of all domains. Or you can also do a per domain LDAP configuration so that different users in different domains can authenticate against different LDAP catalogs, which is sometimes a convenient and interesting way, especially if you're doing some kind of a reseller business and this kind of stuff. However, with LDAP, we have these 3 different ways. I'm not going into any level of details. This is all covered properly by the documentation. But we have a manual import, which I'm assuming most of the people might be using, of the LDAP accounts, which will create accounts and users in CloudStack. We have something called auto import, and we have something called auto sync. Again, this is all covered properly by the documentation, written by one of my colleagues from ShapeBlue. And it takes some effort to configure and test and validate, especially if you are using those auto import and auto sync methods. Right. Moving forward, SAML or SSO, single sign-on, as you might call it. This is a thing that came next at some point, and this obviously requires that the SAML is actually, the plugin itself is activated or enabled, turned on, if you like, in the CloudStack, and then For every user, not account, but for every user of every account, CloudStack administrator would need to actually enable the SAML SSO login, after which that user will be able to log in. Now, when you log in against SAML, you are actually logging in against external URL, and the response is sent back to CloudStack and your browser. And basically, we are looking from the response that's sent back from the SAML authentication provider. Among other things, we also have a username as a parameter which is sent. So we are trying to basically match a user in CloudStack database which has the same username as the username returned from the SAML provider, and that's how we decide which CloudStack user is actually logged in once a human is logged in by the SAML provider. So we are matching username. That's basically the message. It's been tested with a couple of different, let's say, softwares or SAML providers, probably more than what's just initially on the slide, and this is actually taken from the documentation. And obviously it takes some time to configure. All these were actually available before more recent versions of CloudStack. And now with CloudStack 4.19, we're going to cover OAuth in details a little bit later. This also requires the plugin to be enabled in the global settings. We currently support GitHub and Google as the OAuth2 providers, but there is a framework where you can easily plug other providers if you like so, your own organization. When you authenticate via OAuth, we again return some parameters, among which is the email. In contrast to SAML, where we are looking for the username, here we are using for an email in the response, and then we are searching for an email for a user which has a specific email in the CloudStack database to decide which CloudStack user is logged in once a human is logged in on the external portal. If there are multiple users with the same email address, the login will fail, and so on. I would say this is pretty easy to configure. You'll see a very brief demo with basically configuring OAuth from scratch with GitHub and enabling 2FA in probably under 5 minutes or so. Very quick. You'll see more details later on, but the idea is that you get this nice, let's say, button once you enable OAuth provider, specifically GitHub, and obviously if your users are in the subdomain, you first need to populate the subdomain or the domain in CloudStack, and then click on this one without filling in obvious username and password, right? And CloudStack will try to find a matching user with a matching email address in a given domain. So let's go into the actual topics of the specific of this actually presentation. 2FA. So why do we need 2FA? Sorry, wrong slide. 2FA obviously provides additional layer of security, prevents some kind of a man-in-the-middle attack. I personally know a case of a friend of mine who has his own company, who somebody managed to steal his own Gmail password, nothing too fancy, but still he is kind of higher ranked in his company, and even though he has crazy complex password and not saved in browser, nothing, somehow, in whatever way, probably on the router somewhere, somebody managed to steal his password and do some kind of damage, personal damage. So here by using 2FA, we basically prevent man-in-the-middle attack, which effectively prevents attacker to get access to our whatever we are authenticating to, CloudStack portal or mail or whatever, and also in the end, let's say, prevents hijacking an account. I guess this is just a common sense, what I've just said, nothing too interesting. Now with 2FA, this was actually introduced in CloudStack 4.18.0, so it's already there. As with many other, let's say, optional features, especially security features, this is disabled by default, and you can enable it. When you enable it, it's optional, which means it's enabled. What does it mean? It's possible for the end users to configure 2FA for themselves. And to make a game with words, you can set it to mandatory optionally. Or when you set global setting, beside turning it on, you can say, okay, it's mandatory. And then all the users, once they log in, they will be actually required to set 2FA. For the 2FA, we support two kinds of things. The first one is TOTP applications, so usual Google Authenticator, maybe Microsoft Authenticator, any kind of time-based authenticator. And we also support what's known as a static pin. You'll see how it works. In my head, personally, just in my head, this is maybe not a real 2FA because it's always the same pin. It's stored in CloudStack database. It's always the same password, always the same pin, but it does provide additional layer of security in some sense. Definitely TOTP is what you want to use. 2FA can be also enabled or disabled per domain. So even if you enforce it globally, you can enable or disable per domain, which again, if you are, for example, running public cloud, reseller business, whatever is convenient for every, let's say, reseller, every company to be able to configure it the way they want. Also, there is a issuer, as it says. It's a global config, but it's also a config per domain. By default, the value of the global configuration issuer is CloudStack. So when you add your CloudStack to a TOTP, it will say CloudStack dash and then the name of the user for which you are enabling TOTP. Again, if you're running reseller business, you might have company 1 dash user 1, user 3, and then company 2. For each domain, you can set a different issuer, which is, let's say, a convenience. Now, a couple of things. Obviously, you can do everything via API, but just because you can do it via API, that doesn't mean you don't want to get your hands dirty and do a simple SQL. So if for any reason you want to disable 2FA for a user or for maybe all 10,000 users in your organization, you can literally just update the user table and set specifically the is user 2FA enabled field to 0 and a couple of other fields to null, where user ID is equals XXX, or without this clause, obviously this will reset or disable 2FA for all the accounts. Again, you can use API for this to automate, or you can get it the old way, good old-fashioned way, like we did it maybe, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years ago when we were kids. Jokes aside, you can also set a static pin for a user. If for any reason you want to, I don't know, enforce some kind of initial additional layer of security, you can also update the user table and set is user 2FA enabled yes, specify the key. This is just an example key, and by default, CloudStack generates 6-digit. You can probably add 20-digit when you do MySQL, and that would be maybe a nice improvement that we can make this configurable. Doesn't have to be, but maybe an interesting improvement. And we say that the 2FA provider is static pin, not TOTP, but just a static pin. And again, we can specify for a single user or just do it in general. Now also keep in mind that disabling 2FA globally or per domain, it actually only disables the possibility for the users to configure 2FA for themselves, but it doesn't deactivate 2FA for those users who have already set their 2FA. If you want to go crazy, then you apply this one just without the where clause, and you basically disable 2FA for all your users. Right. For the 2FA demo, let's do that together with the OAuth. So I'm going to do a short demo about configuring OAuth, and then we're going to log in as a specific user, conveniently named Andrija after me, and then I'm going to enable 2FA for myself, disable it again, enable with a static pin as well, just to show you how it works, all together under, I think, 7 minutes, very brief. Good, the next topic, OAuth2. OAuth2 will be available as of CloudStack 4.19. Don't take my word, but I'm hoping roughly, very roughly in a month's time, it might be out. We are still kind of finishing some final features, bells and whistles, but I'm hoping roughly in a month's time it will be out. Obviously, the beauty of this is that it basically enables users to authenticate against their own organization. Many users have their own either GitHub organization, probably all of you guys who are working in some kind of company have your GitHub organization, you keep your things over there. Currently, we support GitHub and we support Google. You can test with your personal Google Gmail account. Just would go to Google Cloud, create a project, and that's it. Later on, just follow the normal steps. If you have anything else, any other kind of organization or application that provides you with this kind of centralized login for your company, you can plug it in with some development, obviously. The idea is that this is all very widely used, and you can actually, on pretty much any software these days, online portals, you can either create your local user and password, or you can say sign up with Gmail or Google, actually, or sign up with Facebook or things like that, right? So it's very, I would say, modern in general, but it's really widely used and it's secure. So it's a very good addition, I would say. A couple of more words. Obviously, as with 2FA, it's disabled by default. Once you enable it, I think after this one, the restart of the management server is needed. And after that, under the main configuration menu, where you have also global configuration and everything else, you will get a new item, if you like, which is called OAuth configuration. And that's the place where you can actually, you'll see all this in the demo, by the way. That's the place where you actually configure your GitHub or Google as authentication, OAuth2 authentication provider. And that's it. You'll see all this in details. We need a couple of things, but again, let's better see this in a demo. In general, the provider, which is a GitHub, will give you a client ID. It will give you a password, period. Two things. And you need to read the documentation as usual, RTFM, and you need to know what's the form or syntax or the form of the redirect URL. It's your main cloud URL, and then question mark verify OAuth. You'll see it later on. You need to use this redirect URL to paste it both on the provider side and also on the CloudStack side, but it's very simple, as you'll see in the demo. As I kind of briefly mentioned previously, versus SAML, where we look for a matching username in the response from the SAML provider. Here, with OAuth, we are checking the email, which was returned as a successful login response to CloudStack, and we try to find a user with a matching email. If there are multiple users with this matching email, there will be an error. CloudStack will tell you, sorry, there are multiple users with the same email. Sorry, will not log in anybody. So you need to pay attention to that. Obviously, you can have users in different domains which have the same email. Might be a normal scenario, might be not so usual scenario, but that will work. You'll see how this works. And also, when you want to use OAuth2 for the authentication for a certain user, before that you actually need to have that user created or account with the user, at least one user, obviously. You need to have it created in CloudStack, and they can still use the local authentication if they want so. So there is no way to kind of disable. Maybe that could be a nice improvement, who knows. In future, that you give us the possibility when you enable OAuth for a user, then he maybe should not be able to log in using local credentials, maybe a configurable thing. The interesting thing is this one. We need to know, and again, this is only documentation. You have your main URL without /client, because that's basically the web app. And then you just add question mark verify OAuth. That's the form of the URL, which is a redirect URL. This is what you will paste both on the provider, GitHub, and also in CloudStack when you configure GitHub as a provider. So yeah, let's do a short demo. There was no value really in me doing a live demo for this because it's a very quick one. And unfortunately, I could also not record the screen of the mobile phone because all these Google Authenticator, they ban or simply ban Android from allowing to record the screen. So unfortunately, I could not record the screen to show you. But you probably have already used Google Authenticator many times, so that's kind of hopefully not right. Hopefully, this is kind of visible in sense of resolution. So I'm going to log in as the admin of the cloud, and I'm actually going to global configuration, and I want to enable 2FA and OAuth2. So I'm going to go to the configuration, to the global settings, and I'm going to actually search, which is the easiest way to do, OAuth. You will see it's already turned on a single toggle button because, as I mentioned, it requires management server restart, so just to spare some time. That is the reason for this demo I already enabled it, so you don't need to wait until the management server is restarted. And also I'm going to enable, again, it's already enabled 2FA. It's just a matter of hitting the toggle button. And you can actually see over here, mandate user 2FA if you want to mandate it or make it mandatory for all the users. There are a couple of other parameters which are really not important for the moment, but you can read what they affect. After you enable OAuth, you will get a separate menu item under the configuration. And this is the place where we want to actually register a new OAuth provider. So we need to choose the provider. It's GitHub or Google. We need to give it whatever kind of arbitrary description which makes sense actually for us. And then we have 3 fields. Client and password we will get from the provider, and the redirect URL is, as I already mentioned on the slide, I have it pasted over here. I will just copy my cloud, whatever, /verify OAuth. Probably I made a mistake here on my slide. It needs to be /client /verify OAuth, right? Yeah, so this is the correct one. And now I'm actually going to go to my GitHub, and I want to enable things. This is my private GitHub. I am part of my company organization, but this is my private, let's say private GitHub. I'm going to settings. And after clicking on settings, I'm going to developer settings. As simple as that. And I'm going to obviously have OAuth applications. Click on that. At the moment, there are no OAuth applications. You can imagine I'm going to actually click on the green button. Give it any name, whatever makes sense for you, my cloud, CloudStack, something like that. Homepage URL, well, you know your homepage, obviously. Description is irrelevant. And we have authorization callback URL. This is the redirect URL that we specify both here and in CloudStack. So I'm going basically to copy this value from here and put it in the GitHub. And basically that's it. I'm going to click on register, which in turn will give me an error. Why? Because I'm using custom port, so I need to specify this is HTTP or HTTPS, both here and there. So you need to be very explicit with what you set, which is very fine, I would say, nothing wrong there. So finally, I'm going to register the application. And as you can see, it has given me a client ID. So I need to copy this client ID and paste it into CloudStack in the provider client ID field, obviously. And I also need a secret key, again, from my provider or from the GitHub. In the GitHub, you actually need to click on generate, and I'll copy this password, which actually looks like a hash, but it's just a clear text password. And I'm going to paste it in the secret key, and that's pretty much it. That's the configuration of the, or adding GitHub as the OAuth provider, period. Simple, I would say, stupid in a most positive way, simple and stupid, KISS method, keep it simple, very nice. Now, just before we continue, let me show you, I'm going to use the account called Andrija. I have users, and I have one user, but the important thing is this is my email address, my first.last name at shadowblue.com. It needs to match the email of this specific account, which I'm using from the GitHub. As I told you, we get the response, and it needs to match email. If I change the email of my user, I won't be logged in. So let's try. I know that my user Andrija is created in a domain called sub, not very descriptive, but there you go. And I just will specify the subdomain where to look for my user after I'm logged in with GitHub. And you get this fancy button, sign in with GitHub. First time it will ask you to authorize me on the GitHub, and that's pretty much it. I'm logged in. Now we're going to go through the exercise. I'll go to my profile over here, which is actually editing the user of my account. Same if I go to account and click on user and so on. And there is a button which I'm not sure if you can see due to this being a little bit skewed. There is a button which says set up two-factor authentication. We are choosing Google Authenticator or other TOTP. There is no difference actually. For whatever reason, we have it like that. I'm going to click on setup, and I'm going to get a QR code like you do in any other. And now imagine I'm using my mobile phone, Google Authenticator. I'm pointing to the QR code. It's being added. I will read the code that I got there and enter it back to verify adding, let's say, or activating 2FA. As I said, this is something you cannot record, unfortunately, neither in Microsoft Authenticator nor in Google because of security policies on Android. So let's log out and let's log in again
Some applause.
Thank you.
All right, questions from the room? Of course, Venko.
I have a number of questions. I had to write them. So first, for OAuth authentication, is there a way to import users?
No. As of the moment, no. There is no way to import users.
So you need to have your users
you need to pre-create them
with a matching email address.
Exactly. So you will need users in whatever domains with a matching email address.
Okay. Then I don't understand well OAuth. Can you explain why you need to develop plugins for each new OAuth method, OAuth provider? Isn't it sufficient just to provide some configuration? And how difficult it is to add a new OAuth provider in CloudStack?
To be honest, I wouldn't know the answer to that question, but Harry, can you advise maybe, is there any additional development required?
Just the usual plugin framework that we have, right? So we have to just implement a couple of methods over there. So the way we authenticate to the provider is the difference. See, the
so
way
there is no...
those are different APIs, say, so for Google and GitHub.
Okay, there is no single API interface.
But what we can do is we can use some organized key clock kind of things just to configure it at key clock and add that key clock here.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And the last question. So in this demo, you use your personal GitHub account to set up OAuth provider. How this domain and the authentication method is related to your account in GitHub?
How it's related?
Yeah, because so all the users of this domain need to have their own accounts in GitHub. Is there a relation between your account that you use to register OAuth provider with the other users? For example, can I log in with my GitHub account if I am registered with my email address?
Okay, so for the sake of this demo, I use my personal email account, which is a single account. But if you're running an organization, like for example, we have our ShareBlue GitHub organization, you can log in with whatever is configured, but on the organization level. I configured this on my personal level for the sake of the demo because I'm not admin in my organization, but otherwise you would add it for the whatever is the domain, or not domain, but whatever admin.
Yeah, it's just per organization level. So It's just a one-time operation only. So we have to configure it once. Yeah, for emails, there are a couple of advanced options where we can mention like allow only these set of email addresses and all. Domain, it's not related to the GitHub or Google providers. It's completely with the CloudStack.
I mean, the registering auth provider, is it somehow related to your GitHub account? And can we use this registered auth provider for all other GitHub users? Or these GitHub users should be in the same GitHub organization as you are?
By default, there is no such restriction. Say, suppose if you have used the same credentials or whatever what Andrija has used, you should be able to log in, because that's just an organization level identification at GitHub.
Okay.
So it just uses the authentication process only, not the organization level details. But we can still have those level of what do you say, limits on the email addresses, like only allow these set of email addresses in this organization. Those set of things we have to do it in the GitHub provider or Google provider.
Okay, thanks. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from the room? It's probably going to be the last one because we're kind of running out.
Thanks, Andrea and Harry. Can we configure different organization for subdomains?
I don't think there are options to configure different providers per domain, Harry, right? This is only for the moment global. It's global for the moment, but yeah, that would be also a nice improvement, I guess, to be able to override, like we can do LDAP per domain. So it would be a good thing. Again, I'm just giving an example of our reseller business where each reseller is on a separate domain. Okay. That could be an interesting, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Can we enforce user to log in with OAuth2 or without password?
No, at the moment, no. But again, this could be a nice improvement that we somehow mark or extend the database fields in the users table. If it's enabled for OAuth, then disable local authentication.
Thank you. And maybe just set the random password.
All right.
Yeah, okay, or set the wrong password.
All right. Unfortunately, we're out of time. There are a couple of questions online, but I'm pretty sure we covered them within the slides. So once more, thank you, Andrija. It was a pleasure. And once more, let's give him a big round of applause.